The burn scars beneath Jenna Roberts' vibrant red blouse were a secret she guarded more fiercely than any corporate merger. Each morning, she buttoned that silk armor with trembling fingers, convinced that the twisted landscape of her skin had made her permanently unmatchable. But when the building security lead found her breaking down in her locked office after hours, and she finally whispered the truth she'd never dare to speak. "No one wants to date me." John McKean didn't flinch, didn't look away, and didn't leave. He simply reached for her hand and said 4 words that would change everything. "I'm not going anywhere." Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel, and it proves that powerful stories resonate everywhere. Jenna Roberts was 32 years old when she finally accepted that some things would never change. The burn scars covering her torso and arms were one of those things. She'd gotten them 10 years ago in a warehouse fire, and despite multiple surgeries, they remained a permanent reminder of the worst night of her life. Every morning, Jenna stood in front of her bedroom mirror and went through the same routine. She would look at the scars, feel the familiar wave of shame, and then carefully select a long-sleeve blouse to cover them. Red was her favorite color now. She wore red blouses, red dresses, red blazers. The bold color made people focus on her face, on her confidence, on anything except what lay beneath the fabric. At work, Jenna was known as the Ice Queen. She was the CEO of a mid-sized marketing firm, and she ran it with precision and control. Her employees respected her, but also feared her a little. She never socialized after work, never attended company parties, and certainly never dated anyone from the office. People whispered that she was married to her job, that she had impossibly high standards, that she was just too focused on success to care about relationships. The truth was much simpler and much sadder. Jenna believed that no one would want her once they saw what was underneath her carefully chosen clothes. She had tried dating a few times after the accident. Each time, when the relationship reached a point of physical intimacy, she would make an excuse and end things. The fear of rejection was too much. It was easier to be alone than to see disgust or pity in someone's eyes. John McKean worked in the same building as Jenna, but in a completely different world. He was the head of security, which meant he supervised the night guards, handled the building safety protocols, and fixed things when they broke. He was quiet, practical, and kind. He was also a single father to a 6-year-old boy named Tommy. John's wife had left when Tommy was just a baby. She said she wasn't ready to be a mother, that she felt trapped, that she needed to find herself. John had been heartbroken, but not bitter. He focused all his energy on raising Tommy and making sure his son felt loved and secure. Money was tight, and the hours were long, but John never complained. He and Tommy were a team. Most people in the building barely noticed John. He did his job well, which meant everything ran smoothly. And when things run smoothly, people don't think about the person making it happen. But John noticed things. He noticed when the coffee machine on the 3rd floor started making strange noises 2 weeks before it broke. He noticed when Mrs. Chun from accounting started parking in a different spot because her knee was bothering her. And he noticed that Jenna Roberts, the powerful CEO on the top floor, never left her office before 9 p.m. and always left alone. It was a Thursday night in October when everything changed. John was doing his final round of the building at 10:30 p.m. Most offices were dark and empty, but he saw a light coming from under Jenna's door. This wasn't unusual. She often worked late. But as he walked past, he heard something that made him stop. It was the sound of someone crying. John stood outside the door for a moment, uncertain. He knew Jenna's reputation. She was intimidating, professional, and very private. The smart thing would be to walk away and pretend he hadn't heard anything. But John had a 6-year-old son who sometimes cried at night when he missed his mother, and John had learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is simply be present. He knocked softly on the door. "Ms. Roberts?" "It's John from security." "Are you all right?" The crying stopped immediately. There was a long silence, and then Jenna's voice, carefully controlled, said, "I'm fine, just working late." But her voice cracked on the word, "fine," and John knew she wasn't. He tried the door handle and found it locked. "Ms. Roberts, I heard you crying. You don't have to talk to me, but I'm not going to leave until I know you're okay." Another long silence, then the sound of footsteps, and the door opened. Jenna stood there, and John was shocked by what he saw. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Her usually perfect hair was messy, and most noticeably, her red silk blouse was unbuttoned at the top, revealing the edge of something that looked like scar tissue. "I'm fine," she said again, but this time there was no force behind the words. She just sounded tired and sad. "Can I come in?" John asked gently. Jenna hesitated, then stepped back and let him enter. She closed the door behind him and locked it again. Then she walked to her desk and sat down, not looking at him. John pulled up a chair and sat across from her. He didn't say anything. He had learned with Tommy that sometimes people just need someone to sit with them while they figure out what they want to say. After several minutes, Jenna spoke. "Do you know why I always wear long sleeves?" she asked, still not looking at him. "No," John said simply. Jenna laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Because I'm covered in scars. From a fire 10 years ago. I was trapped in a warehouse, and by the time the firefighters got me out, I had third-degree burns over 40% of my body. The doctors saved my life, but they couldn't make me look normal again." She finally looked up at John, and there were fresh tears in her eyes. "I'm successful. I'm smart. I'm financially secure. But none of that matters because no one wants to date someone who looks like a monster underneath their clothes." John felt his heart break a little. He thought about all the times he had seen Jenna walking through the building with her head high and her shoulders back, projecting such confidence. He had never imagined she was carrying this kind of pain. "Can I see?" he asked quietly. Jenna's eyes widened. "What?" "Your scars. Can I see them?" For a moment, Jenna looked like she might say no, might ask him to leave, might retreat back behind her professional armor. But something in John's gentle, non-judgmental expression made her feel safe. Slowly, with shaking hands, she unbuttoned her red blouse and pulled it open. The scars were extensive. They covered her chest, her stomach, and snaked up her arms. The skin was discolored, raised in some places and puckered in others. It was clear she had been through something terrible. John looked at the scars carefully. Then he looked into Jenna's eyes. "These scars tell me that you're a survivor," he said. "They tell me that you're strong. They tell me that you fought to live. And you won. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth your time." Jenna stared at him, and then she started crying again. But this time it was different. It was a release of 10 years of shame and fear and loneliness. John stood up, moved around the desk, and simply put his hand on her shoulder while she cried. When she finally stopped, she looked up at him and whispered, "Why are you being so kind to me?" John smiled. "Because you're a human being who needed kindness tonight. And because I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough." They talked for another hour. Jenna told him about the fire, about the painful recovery, about her failed attempts at dating. John told her about his wife leaving, about the challenges of raising Tommy alone, about the loneliness of being a single parent. They discovered they had more in common than they ever would have guessed. When John finally left that night, he said something at the door that Jenna would never forget. "I'm not going anywhere, Jenna. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here." And for the first time in 10 years, Jenna believed that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face everything alone. After that night, everything changed. John started stopping by Jenna's office during his rounds, and they would talk for a few minutes. Sometimes it was about work, sometimes about Tommy, sometimes about nothing in particular. Jenna found herself looking forward to these visits. She started leaving her office door unlocked. 3 weeks after their first real conversation, John asked Jenna if she would like to have dinner with him and Tommy. "Nothing fancy," he said. "Just pizza at our apartment. Tommy would love to meet you." Jenna was terrified. She had barely dated anyone in 10 years, and now she was going to meet John's son? But she also didn't want to say no. John had been so kind to her, and she genuinely wanted to know him better. So she said yes. The following Saturday, Jenna drove to John's apartment. It was in a modest building on the other side of town, the kind of place where families lived because it was affordable, not because it was fancy. She felt nervous as she knocked on the door. John answered with a big smile. Come in. Tommy, Miss Roberts is here." A small boy with dark hair and bright eyes came running from another room. "Hi, are you my dad's friend? Dad says you're really smart and you run a whole company." Jenna couldn't help but smile. Tommy's enthusiasm was infectious. "Yes, I am, and you can call me Jenna." "Okay, Jenna, do you like pizza?" "Dad ordered pepperoni because that's my favorite, but he got a cheese 1, 2 in case you don't like pepperoni." The evening was wonderful. They ate pizza, played board games, and watched a movie. Tommy sat between Jenna and John on the couch, and at one point, he fell asleep with his head on Jenna's shoulder. She looked down at him and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of belonging. After John carried Tommy to bed, he and Jenna sat in the kitchen drinking tea. "Thank you for coming," John said. "Tommy really liked you. He already asked if you could come back next week." "I'd love to," Jenna said, and she meant it. They started spending more time together. Sometimes it was just Jenna and John having coffee, and sometimes Tommy was there too. Jenna began to feel like part of their little family. She helped Tommy with his homework, attended his school play, and even learned to make his favorite pancakes. John never pressured her. He never asked to see more of her scars or made her feel like she needed to explain herself. He just accepted her as she was. It was the first time in Jenna's adult life that she felt truly seen and truly safe. One evening, about 2 months after their first pizza night, Jenna and John were sitting on his apartment balcony after Tommy had gone to bed. They were talking about their childhoods when John suddenly went quiet. "What is it?" Jenna asked. John looked uncomfortable. "There's something I need to tell you. I've been trying to figure out how to say it for weeks, but there's no easy way." Jenna felt her heart start to race. Was he going to tell her he couldn't see her anymore? That he had met someone else? That this was all too complicated? "Okay," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. John took a deep breath. "You told me that you were in a warehouse fire 10 years ago. You said firefighters pulled you out." "Yes," Jenna said, confused about where this was going. "That fire was on October 15th, 2015. In the industrial district on the east side of the city." Jenna stared at him. "How do you know that?" John met her eyes. "Because I was there, Jenna. I was one of the firefighters who pulled you out." The world seemed to stop. Jenna couldn't breathe. "What?" "I was a rookie firefighter back then." John continued. "It was only my 3rd month on the job. We got the call about the warehouse fire, and when we arrived, we were told there might be someone trapped inside. I was part of the team that went in. We found you unconscious near the back of the building. I was the one who carried you out." Tears were streaming down Jenna's face. "I don't understand. You've known this whole time? Since that night in my office?" "No," John said quickly. "I didn't recognize you at first. You looked different then. Your hair was shorter and you were badly injured. But that night in your office, when you showed me your scars, I recognized them. I had seen them before in the hospital. After we brought you in, I remembered because your case affected me so much. I had nightmares for months about not getting to you in time." Jenna didn't know what to say. The man who had saved her life 10 years ago was the same man who had just saved her again, in a completely different way. It seemed impossible, like something out of a movie. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" she asked. "Because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything," John said. "I didn't want you to think that I was being kind to you because I was some kind of hero. I was being kind to you because I care about you, Jenna. Not because of what happened 10 years ago, but because of who you are now." Jenna stood up and walked to the railing of the balcony. She looked out at the city lights, trying to process what she had just learned. All this time, she had thought of herself as broken, as damaged goods. But John had seen her at her absolute worst, burned unconscious, fighting for her life, and he had fought to save her. And now, 10 years later, he had seen her scars and hadn't turned away. "I quit firefighting 2 years later," John said from behind her, "after my wife left. I needed a job with more stable hours so I could take care of Tommy. But I never forgot that night. I never forgot you." Jenna turned around. "I don't know what to say." John stood up and walked over to her. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know the truth." They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Then Jenna did something she hadn't done in 10 years. She reached out and took John's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving me then, and for saving me now." John squeezed her hand. "I told you I wasn't going anywhere. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My father said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers. But I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to my channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent." Now let's continue. The revelation changed everything and nothing. Jenna and John's relationship deepened, but it was based on more than just their shared history. They genuinely enjoyed each other's company. They made each other laugh. They supported each other through difficult days. 6 months after John told Jenna the truth about the fire, he asked her to move in with him and Tommy. Jenna was hesitant at first. She had lived alone for so long, and she worried about disrupting the life John and Tommy had built together. But Tommy was the one who convinced her. "Please move in with us, Jenna," he begged. "Then you could be here every day, and you could be like my mom." Jenna's heart melted. She looked at John, who was smiling, and she knew this was what she wanted. "Okay," she said, "let's do it." Moving in was chaotic. Jenna's apartment had been neat and organized, with everything in its place. John and Tommy's apartment was lived in and comfortable, with toys on the floor and dishes in the sink. Combining their two worlds was a challenge. There were disagreements. Jenna wanted to implement systems and routines. John was more relaxed about housework. Tommy was excited about having Jenna there, but also worried that she might try to replace his real mother. It took time to figure everything out, but slowly they became a real family. Jenna learned to relax her need for control. John learned to communicate better about his needs. Tommy learned that having Jenna in his life didn't mean forgetting his biological mother. It just meant having one more person who loved him. Jenna started wearing short sleeves at home. At first, it felt strange and vulnerable, but neither John nor Tommy treated her any differently. Tommy once asked about the scars, and Jenna explained that she had been in a fire. Tommy thought about this for a moment and then said, "That must have been scary, but the scars look kind of cool, like a superhero." Jenna laughed and hugged him. "Thank you, Tommy. You're pretty cool yourself." At work, people noticed a change in Jenna. She was still professional and competent, but she seemed happier. She started accepting invitations to company events. She smiled more. Some of her employees even joked that the Ice Queen was melting. Jenna and John got married 2 years after she moved in. It was a small ceremony with just close friends and family. Tommy was a ring bearer, and he took his job very seriously. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Tommy cheered so loudly that everyone laughed. At the reception, Jenna gave a speech. "For a long time, I thought I was broken," she said. "I thought that what happened to me 10 years ago had ruined my chance at a normal life. But John and Tommy taught me that there's no such thing as normal. There's just love and family, and showing up for each other every day. These scars on my body tell the story of the worst night of my life, but they also tell the story of how I survived. And now, they're part of the story of how I found my family." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Life wasn't perfect. John's hours at work were still demanding. Jenna still traveled for business. Tommy had difficult days at school and nights when he missed his biological mother. Money was sometimes tight, especially after they bought a small house. So Tommy could have his own room, but they figured it out together. When Tommy struggled with math, Jenna hired a tutor. When Jenna had a particularly stressful week at work, John would cook her favorite meal and draw her a bath. When John's car broke down and they couldn't afford to fix it right away, they made an adventure and took the bus together. Tommy grew from a 6-year-old boy into a teenager. He started calling Jenna Mom without hesitation. When his friends asked about his family, he would say, "My mom runs a marketing company and my dad keeps people safe." He never felt the need to explain that Jenna wasn't his biological mother. She was his mom in every way that mattered. Jenna and John had challenges in their marriage like any couple. They argued about finances, about parenting decisions, about whose turn it was to do the dishes. But they always talked through their problems. They never went to bed angry. and they always remembered what they had overcome to be together. One night, when Tommy was 15, he asked Jenna about her scars again. He was older now and understood more about what she had been through. "Did it hurt a lot?" he asked. "Yes," Jenna said honestly. "It was the most painful thing I've ever experienced, both physically and emotionally. Do you wish it had never happened?" Jenna thought about this carefully. "I wish I hadn't had to go through the pain. But I don't wish the scars away, because they're part of my story. And if I didn't have these scars, your dad might not have recognized me that day in my office. And we might not be a family." Tommy hugged her. "I'm glad you're my mom, Jenna." "I'm glad I'm your mom, too," she whispered. 15 years after that night in Jenna's office, when she had broken down and shown John her scars for the first time, they decided to renew their wedding vows. Tommy was now 21 and in college. He had grown into a confident, kind young man who was studying to become a social worker. He wanted to help other kids who grew up in non-traditional families, just like he had. The vow renewal ceremony was held in the backyard of the house they had bought all those years ago. It was decorated with red flowers, a nod to Jenna's favorite color, and the red blouses she used to hide behind. Jenna wore a sleeveless white dress. Her scars were visible, and she didn't care. She had long ago stopped feeling shame about them. They were part of her story, and her story was beautiful. John stood at the altar waiting for her, and when he saw her walking toward her with Tommy by her side, he started to cry. Even after all these years, she still took his breath away. The officiant spoke about the journey Jenna and John had been on together. 15 years ago, these two people found each other in the most unexpected way, she said. They built a family on a foundation of honesty, acceptance, and love. Today, they're here to reaffirm their commitment to each other and to celebrate everything they've overcome. When it was time for their vows, John spoke first. "Jenna, when I first met you, you were trying to hide who you really were. You thought that your scars made you unlovable. But I saw those scars and I saw survival. I saw strength. I saw beauty. And I fell in love with all of you, not in spite of your scars, but including them. These past 15 years with you and Tommy have been the best of my life. You are my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. I'm still not going anywhere." Everyone laughed and cried at that last line. Then it was Jenna's turn. "John, you saved my life twice. Once in that warehouse fire, when you carried me to safety, and once in my office, when you saw me at my most vulnerable and didn't turn away. You taught me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. You and Tommy gave me a family when I thought I would always be alone. These scars that I used to hide are now part of our story, and I wouldn't change a single thing. I love you, John McKean. Thank you for choosing me every single day." They exchanged rings, simple bands engraved with the date they first met, and the words, "Not going anywhere." After the ceremony, they had a small party with family and friends. Tommy gave a speech that had everyone in tears. "When I was 6 years old, my dad brought home a woman who would change our lives," he said. "Jenna became my mom not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She helped me with my homework, came to my soccer games, and taught me that families come in all shapes and sizes. She also taught me that scars, whether physical or emotional, don't define us. They're just proof that we survived something difficult. I'm proud to be her son." Later that evening, as the party was winding down, Jenna and John stood together looking at their home, their family, and their life. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Jenna asked, "If I hadn't been in that fire? If you hadn't been a firefighter? If you hadn't heard me crying that night?" John pulled her close. "Sometimes. But then I remember that everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. We found each other when we both needed someone to see us for who we really are. I used to think my scars made me a monster," Jenna said softly. "And now?" John asked. Jenna smiled. "Now I think they made me a phoenix. I rose from those ashes, John, and I built a beautiful life. We built it together," John corrected her. "Yes," Jenna agreed. "Together." That night, Jenna looked in the mirror before getting ready for bed. She saw her scars, but she also saw everything else. She saw a successful businesswoman who had worked hard for everything she had. She saw a wife who was deeply loved. She saw a mother who had raised a wonderful son. She saw a survivor who had turned her greatest tragedy into her greatest strength. The scars were still there. They would always be there. But they no longer made her feel broken or unlovable. They were simply part of her story, the story of how she found herself, her family, and her home. John came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Ready for bed?" he asked. Jenna turned around and kissed him. "Ready for anything," she said, "as long as you're not going anywhere." "Never," John promised, "not going anywhere." And he kept that promise for the rest of their lives. This story reminds us that our perceived flaws often matter far less to others than they do to ourselves. Jenna spent a decade believing her scars made her unlovable, when in reality, the right person would see them as evidence of her strength and survival. True connection happens when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable with people who have earned our trust. It's also a powerful reminder that healing isn't about erasing our past traumas. It's about integrating them into our story and finding people who love us not despite our scars, but as a complete person we are, scars included. Sometimes the very thing we're hiding is what leads us to exactly where we need to be. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. Kindly support what I do here by subscribing. And then drop in the comment section if you like part 2 of Jenna, John, and Tommy's story. What new challenges will they face as their family grows? How will Jenna navigate her past trauma when Tommy faces his own difficult moments? Will John's firefighting past come back into their lives in unexpected ways? Let me know if you want to hear more.